Folks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are conducting yet another offensive coordinator interview. This time it is New York Giants quarterbacks coach Shea Tierney, and I am not alone. Joining me is the voice of Evan Wanish, my colleague over at BucsNation.com, and the co-host of the Cannon Fire podcast, the main host of the Real to Real podcast. Evan, something about Shea Tierney that people might not know is that he is a fellow Philadelphia, Pennsylvania resident, much like yourself. What do you think about that?
He's got some brownie points with me then, eh? Yeah, but I did not know that actually, but before you said it, so yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool indeed. So, look, here's the deal with Shea Tierney, right? As I said, he's the quarterbacks coach with the New York Giants. He won a national championship in 2017, by the way, with Alabama, which is pretty darn cool. He was with Brian Dable and the Buffalo Bills coaching staff all the way back from 2018 to 2021, where he served as an offensive assistant and an assistant quarterbacks coach, and was then promoted to official quarterbacks coach of the New York Giants once Brian Dable took that opportunity as head coach over there. And Evan, I'm going to tell you what, the first batch of interviews that were announced, I guess I should say, a lot of people were not very optimistic, maybe is the word, about those interviews. It was certainly a really interesting situation to watch unfold. So this one, maybe a lot of people have some more confidence about. Just to kind of speak more on that, I ran a poll on the channel with 713 votes of who did the people want as the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, and 55% of people said none of the above from the original four options that were announced. But now this is the fifth option here in Shea Tierney. What are your thoughts on him and what he could provide the Buccaneers at the OC position?
Yeah, well, I think people might be a little bit more optimistic because one, a lot of people have talked about the progression of Daniel Jones this season. He had a really nice season, the best season of his career so far, and it was obviously Tierney's first season as quarterbacks coach. So, and I think a lot of people see that Buffalo Bills and they get intrigued because everybody knows about how good the Buffalo Bills have been over the last few seasons and their offense and how much Josh Allen has progressed. So I think that's what would have fans a bit more optimistic about this one than per se. I'm not saying they're bad candidates, but a guy like Jim Bob Cooter or something like that. I think to me, it doesn't really matter. It's not as big of a deal, but I think for fans, when you're just looking at it, oh, this guy has a better track record. He's with the Bills and the Giants this year, rather than, oh, he's been with a bunch of mediocre teams. Like, no, his teams have won a lot. And so it would be interesting to see if he's the guy. He's a young guy. He's a young guy. He's 36 years old. So, it has not called plays before, so that's just like we talked about with Keenan McCardell. That's a risk, obviously, when you're not haven't been a play caller. So we'll see if the Bucs want to take that risk.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think is going to be a really interesting thing to pay attention to, right? Is the lack of play calling, so far. Not to say that, and obviously, you can say that for a lot of guys, and you're not going to get that opportunity to show what you can do as a play caller until you get that opportunity, right? So we have no idea. Just because somebody hasn't called plays does not mean that they would be bad if they get that opportunity. We have no idea, but there is a little bit of a risk there that plays a factor into that. But like you said, you know, Shea Tierney, he worked with Daniel Jones with the New York Giants. They made the playoffs, and Daniel Jones actually took, I would say, a pretty decent leap in terms of perception of where he was the past couple of years versus the perception of where he was this year, and that's pretty notable. You also got to consider he worked with Josh Allen a lot over there in Buffalo, and the leaps and strides that he has made in his career since being drafted by the Bills. I think I even saw a quote when I was doing research on Shea Tierney from Josh Allen, and I don't know the legitimacy of this quote, but it was something along the lines of Shea Tierney was one of the most underpaid employees on the Bills. That's pretty high praise, I would say, from a guy like Josh Allen to Shea Tierney, if that was something that was actually said and reported out there. So, there definitely, I think, will be more optimism surrounding this, especially, like you said, with guys coming from better coaching staffs and, being around teams that are more intriguing, that win on a more consistent basis, like the Buffalo Bills, like Brian Dable's coaching staff. I have a lot of respect for Brian Dable as a head coach as well. I think he's a fantastic coach. So if a little bit of what he can do can go into Shea Tierney and what he could potentially do as an OC option, then Bucs might have themselves a pretty good guy on their hands. Like you said, he is a pretty young guy as well, 36 years old. And this is an intriguing option in my opinion. But you always got to go back to, he hasn't had much experience calling plays, or in fact, no experience calling plays. So will that play a factor into that? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But folks, the interviews are continuing to wrap up and continuing to progress a little bit more. Evan, we have one more that we're going to be talking about after this, but do you really expect many more interviews after this? Because the Bucs are up to 6 candidates so far. Do you really expect them to interview many more?
Well, I will say it's likely 5 candidates because Pep Hamilton had already turned down the interview. So I wouldn't really consider him a candidate. So I would say 5. I would expect maybe 1 or 2 more. So I wouldn't expect many more, but I also think Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report has said they want to cast a pretty wide net. So it wouldn't shock me if there are a few more names here thrown out within the next week or so.
Yeah, so folks, we'll have to wait and see, but let us know your thoughts and opinions about Shea Tierney down in the comments section below. Do you want him as your offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Do you prefer one of the previous options that we talked about, or do you prefer somebody that we have not talked about before? Give us your thoughts and opinions. We'd love to hear them. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope y'all enjoyed. We will see you all in the next video or the next live stream, but until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.